Thank you very much. I'm kind of up front. I'm very comfortable. This is like the third year I think I've been here in Canada doing this event, and I really like the format, and I like the way this is conducted. And I guess my nervousness about being up here is the fact that I have a real passion for what I'm going to be saying. I really believe it. And if that's true, it comes through, whether I like it or not, and consequently, I'm hoping that you can understand that this is some really good content that's designed to help you understand what to do next. There's a couple of points that I want to bring up front. Number one, it's an exciting time to be involved with technology. I said that yesterday when I was on the panel. I really believe that. I can't think of a time when technology is changing so much, so fast, and the people in this room are sitting in a place to make a difference in terms of how people use technology, how they leverage it in their lives, in their professions, whatever. It's an exciting time to be doing what we're doing, and I feel very fortunate. And I look back at the decades or whatever that I've been involved with technology. This is really a great time. The second thing I want to emphasize is the fact that there's a whole new set of rules being manifested. And we're going to be talking about what some of those rules are. The game has definitely changed. And the way that it used to be is no longer adequate. And if I have passion, it's trying to get that message across. It's no longer what it used to be. And the third point is the fact that IT has a critical role to play. We heard some statements, and I get into it, where people look down on their IT department or whatever. We have this, and I'm actually going to quote it, a CIO sentiment survey, and it kind of goes up, constantly over the last, 10, 15 years. The investment in technology by the line of business was continually go up, and where did it come out of? It was the technology that was being invested as a percentage by IT. A couple of years ago, it started to change. All of a sudden, there was this shift. It was no longer continually going up, but the funding from IT started to increase, and the line of business started decreasing as a percentage of the total. And you have to step back and go wonder why. There are a myriad of things that IT does that line of business IT does not want to do. And if you understand what those things are, it makes a difference. So anyway, I wanted to get those 3 points across. That sets a mindset of how I'm looking at things. The other thing I'm going to be emphasizing in this presentation deals with the concept of theory of constraint. It's something that was documented heavily in the 70s by Dr. Elias Goldratt. He was very fundamental in the ERP. And if you think about it, think of a bicycle assembly factory. You have an assembly line, and it's going at a certain speed, and of course somebody wants more out of less, and they speed it up. What invariably happens? Tell me what invariably happens when you speed up that assembly line where it hasn't been before. It breaks down, right? There's a theory of constraint, is the fact there's a set of constraints, there's a set of issues that prevent that from going at a higher speed. The theory of constraint that formed the foundation of SAP, or not SAP, the role that ERP played, is the fact that you focus on that constraint. You get it fixed. You make that a priority, and then when it's fixed, what do? You turn the assembly line back up, you make it at a higher speed, and then what happens? It breaks again. You're at a higher speed, it breaks again. And the point is focus that. In the discussions that I've had over the years, I really feel this is a principle that needs to be applied to IT. So often we get into these grandiose plans. Think of how we implemented ITIL. You'd turn around and just paralyze everything to institute a change management process. It would take 9 months to do it. Everybody was unhappy at you. And then you'd get it up, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do. So we step back and try to figure out what is the thing that's preventing you from moving on. We've done a lot of maturity maturity workshops. And invariably, you identify all these different factors of security. And the one thing that consistently happens is there's 1, 2, 3 elements associated with that maturity that people are slow in. They are immature in that point. And when you are at that level and you look and say, oh, this part is what I'm not doing well, you go and you work on that part, the constraint, you get it fixed, and what happens? Everything starts to go up because you've removed this very critical constraint out of your environment. It could be change management. It could be the introduction of some new technology. It could be anything associated with IT, and that's unique to your environment. So as I go through this, the question I'd like to ask you is, what is your constraint in your organization that's impacting your ability to move forward with digital transformation? And so we're going to go through what we call the digital deadlock and identify certain things that have been documented. One of the things I love about working at IDC, I'm in my 6th year there, everything is survey-based. We're not allowed to put something on a slide in this company unless there's survey data behind it. I'll contrast that with other places I've been. And you're expected to just come up with these anecdotal stories and identify trends, and they're not founded in quantifiable data. The culture of IDC does that. And consequently, it reinforces something, and I'm going to be getting into some of that right now. So 3 years ago, we were all experimenting with digital transformation. You know, there was the concept of printing a 3D car, and it was showing the power of outsourcing design. It was kind of a prototype. It was exciting, and people got very caught up and you know, made it on the news. The secondly is being able to use your mobile phone, bypass the front desk, walk directly to your door, and it was a loyalty program perk. And the third one was, you know, I never saw this because I don't drink that much, but a robotic bartender, you know, on a cruise ship, and it wasn't just a robot making your drinks. There was a wow factor that was associated with it. So it was kind of experimenting, again, 3 years ago. What's happened now is that at-scale enterprises are deploying DX, and certain things are starting to surface in the data, in our analysis of it, that I'd like to share with you. For example, one of the stories is introducing robots for doing self-scanning inventory in the stores. You think, why did it go blank? Okay. And so you think, well, what's big about that? Well, now they're able to move as a result of this, quote, at-scale operation. They have completely instituted a new type of inventory management that allows them to understand everything that's in their store every 48 hours. That's incredible. That's a new operating model for that company, a very big company. The next one is in the US Postal Service. I never thought that I would be stating the fact that there's been a digital transformation in the US Post Office. I mean, it defies imagination. But every morning, like I'm traveling, I get a notification in my email with a picture of all the mail that's going to be arriving at my mailbox that day. And frankly, I did it out of curiosity, but now I'm actually looking at that, thinking of when of certain things that I'm expecting are coming in. So they've kind of digitally transformed in order to connect better with their clients. And the last one is, you know, these new 787s that Boeing has made, very tied up with Norwegian production of titanium. And they have a titanium frame, but they 3D print 17% of the components and the attachment that go onto that frame. And it equals a 20% reduction in the cost of that plane. So this isn't about just eliminating and automating some welding jobs. They are completely revamping their profit cycle, et cetera, for a very important plane. So let's talk about, again, some of the data. And the question is here, what's your enterprise's approach to digital transformation? Prior to this year, this was always a bell-shaped curve. And there would be the high point in the middle, and you'd have, you know, some people on the two ends of it, tradition. I don't know what to call this thing. It's like a camel hump. You know, it's just, but what this surfaced, it's surfaced in multiple data surveys that have come back this year, 2018. This was our CIO sentiment survey. This was the first place I saw it. Look at stage 3 in the descriptions of digital players that Tony talked about yesterday. There's this huge drop. What happened is the stuff on the one side hasn't changed that much, but those people that were in the middle have shifted over into stage 4 and 5 very effectively, and it's created a bifurcation. The situation that we now are dealing with and what we've been saying is going to happen is actually happening is that if you're not on the digital bandwagon at this point in time as a company, it's getting much more difficult to get there because your competition, the companies that are impacting your industry, are probably in that 50% that have gotten over that middle hump, and they are being very successful. Another survey that did the same thing. This was a survey of technology procurement, again, 2018. It was almost the same thing. 50% are in stages 3 and 4. This was not true in 2017 or any year up to that. And we've divided them into a group into survivors and thrivers. Part of the story that I want to tell is the fact that we started using this nomenclature about 6 years ago. If you think of a bell-shaped curve, survivors are at one end, thrivers are at the other end, and we don't pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the middle because what we're trying to do is identify the characteristics of the thriving IT organization as they are succeeding in digitally transformation. Look at that gray box down at the bottom. We now know how to put, it's called segmentation questions. We know what segmentation questions to put in to find out, is this a company that's doing digital transformation successfully? Or is this a company that's not doing it? So after we've established that this survey respondent is good at digital transformation, we then begin to ask the characteristics about what they're doing. And from that, and what I'd like to share with you today, is what are the behaviors of those that are thriving in the digital transformation world. But in this gray box, reading it, thriving enterprises report higher year-over-year revenue increases, higher percentage of revenue derived from digital transformation initiatives, higher percentage of agile development, higher percentage of employees dedicated to modernization. And so this concept of thrivers is what I'd like to convey. And I'm going to make it very personal at this point in time. My wife and I, we married young, and for lots of reasons that made sense at that particular time, we decided we wanted a large family. And it meant that we had to do certain things differently. We ended up having 7 children. I ended up it was a single bred home, what do you call them, wage earner. You know, my wife didn't work. She worked. Believe me, she worked. She was the magic of the magic sauce in our home. But, you know, my responsibilities were different. But going back to that theory of constraint, it became very obvious to us that there were some things we just weren't going to do. There were ski lessons. We lived in New Hampshire, and all of their friends went to ski lessons. There's no way we were going to afford that. We didn't do it. I remember going into a state of shock every September, putting them to school, and the hundreds of dollars it required to put them in shoes. I mean, that was the one thing. It was always, how expensive is this stuff? You know, and you make decisions about what you're going to do because you have a limited set of resources. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about theory of constraint. There are people here that are thriving in this organization. They know what they need to look at and make the decision, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm going to do and prioritize. And, you know, long term, our kids came out great. We made horrible, horrible, horrible mistakes. Number one, when we had our last baby, it was because we had 2 teenagers at 13 and 15, and it was like, why would we ever do this to ourselves again? You know, you have to move forward with these teenagers, and the rest of your life was spent with teenagers. But it was, you know, I'm trying to use that as an example of sitting back and looking and recognizing you can't do everything, but you can do something. What are the things that you have to do in IT in order to move forward your business and digitally transform it? So, question here, who are you? Are you part of the 50% who are deadlocked, or are you part of the 50% that aren't? That's a personal question that you have to ask yourself. We frequently speak at CIO conferences. I was in one in Chicago last week. This individual raised his hand. I was making some, what I thought were very frank statements about corporate finance, and this forcing IT over decades to allocate costs based upon revenue employees with no understanding of pricing by consumption your set of services. I think that's been a tremendous disservice. I get on a bandwagon about that and I take off, and that's what happened. This conference had the first day being CFO and the second days being CIOs. And this one guy started describing his CFO and how restrictive he was and how, you know, they weren't allowed to do anything. I mean, you're competing in a sense with service providers, infrastructure service providers, software as a service provider, and they know how to price based on consumption. And they've been very appealing, and they know how to speak with your line of businesses for certain things. Sometimes it's not in the best interest to go after something as a service. You need to do it yourself. You need to make those individual decisions. But how do you compete when the people these companies you're competing with know how to price on consumption? That's just, again, one statement. I'm on a bandwagon, I apologize. So these are the deadlocks. Organizations are facing several challenges. We're going to go out, and this presentation is going to go to these 5. What I'd like you to do is to be able to say which of these digital challenges is impeding your digital transformation the most. I want you to walk out of the room thinking, this is the one that's preventing me from moving forward. Remember, we talk about the maturity stage, and there's usually one dimension in there that's keeping you back. One of these deadlocks is inhibiting your ability to move forward aggressively in the others, and it's going to be different for each one of you. So let's move on to the first one. The first and the largest impediment deals with siloed DX initiatives. Raise your hands. How many people here have experienced siloed DX initiatives in their companies? This is pervasive. Again, the largest deadlock that we're talking about. And frequently this moves into an organizational structure. I want to talk about, and this was referenced yesterday by by Lars, when he was asking me a question about, there was a question asked, and he asked me to talk about this one. It was Northwest Mutual. Ford has done the same thing, but this particular discussion is around Northwest Mutual. And basically, they talk about how they reorganize T from projects to products. And I mentioned that yesterday. Consistent factor in those that are thriving in digital transformation. So they took 3,500 IT professionals in this very large insurance company, and they shifted the focus from IT projects and support to something called digital products and engineering, basically delivering a set of managed services. And then they had a functional organization that was replaced with something called experience value streams. I'm not going to go into the philosophy behind this stuff. I'm just trying to get it across. And they offshored commoditized infrastructure and development, frequently at a higher cost than they had been paying for it. But basically what it did was free up resources that allowed them to go after the stuff that only they could do. This other stuff about commoditized infrastructure is something somebody else can do, maybe at a higher cost. And so they ended up with self-autonomous teams that were focused on business outcomes. A message that I tried to state yesterday: if you're doing something in IT and you cannot tie it to a business outcome, you're in trouble, okay? And I compare the delivery of IT to electricity and water. We have been so effective at delivering information technology in our enterprises, people now consider it like water. You turn on the water comes out. You don't have to know the reservoir system or the channel that gets the water to your door or how it's purified. I mean, people don't care about that. They turn on the water and they want to be able to put water in a pan and do something with it. Electricity. They don't care about the grid. They don't care about all the nuances that have to happen in order for that electricity to be delivered to your property. They want to plug it in and it works. And guess what? IT has now reached the status of a utility. They want it to work. They expect it to work. And your statements of we deliver 99.999% reliability, it means nothing to a line of business executive. I'm trying to be frank here. They don't care. What they care about is the thing that's important to their salary, to their bonus, to their whatever it is that they are being measured by. And what is your value proposition on that? And that's what I'm talking about when business outcomes. So they took 20 plus job descriptions down to 7 core jobs. The teams were assembled and reassembled by workload needs. And they did this all in the context of Agile, Lean, and DevOps. So let's move on to some of the points. Tony showed this slide yesterday. And basically, I want to emphasize that it's almost a maturity perspective. So when you're talking about getting through this roadblock, this impediment, Organizationally, you have to sit back and understand where you are, and it's where you are that dictates which of these solutions. If you're just starting out, having a DX special project team that reports to the CEO makes a lot of sense. In this particular case, and again, this was a leadership sentiment survey. It's a worldwide sample, so it includes a lot of mid-sized company in addition to large. But just defining what the mission should be and being able to report that back and getting the digital transformation off the ground, very important role. But then let's say you move up in that maturity, you're establishing an office of digital transformation. This is where the governance begins to move in. Is B here anywhere that I sat next to last night? He was hired into his company basically because of his understanding of governance and how much they needed that as they move forward. But this is where your funding begins to be directed and prioritized from a central place. And again, this is where most people are right now at 46%. The embedded digital business is where people are trying to go when they really have an impact on it. They have a DX component in every line of business, and IT is connected through a business objective very clearly. Again, it's only 20%, 1 in 5 that are doing that. This one on the end, the digital business unit, are basically those large organizations who are so embedded with their legacy business or their legacy infrastructure that they just have to go off and start something completely new in order to generate any kind of DX initiative. Which one of these are you? And I guess the question that I would offer is enterprises are essentially fighting over their DX in organizational structure. I would look out in this room, we probably have all 4 of those types present. The question that I would pose to you is that you need to market IT in whatever context you are expected to deliver and operate in. And I will say 5 years ago when I said market IT, I would have eyes glaze over. It was like, what are you talking about? That's not what we do. And I'm telling you that you have to take responsibility for declaring your value proposition to the company. You have to market yourself. You have to market your teams. You have to market the things that you can deliver. And that means understanding what your core value proposition is. And it's not reliability, security, performance, availability. Those are important. You don't even get to play in the game if you don't do those well. But what's important to the line of business is what you're doing over and above that. You can't even play if you don't get the rest of the stuff right, but they don't care the fact that that's what you're doing. Okay, so that's impediment number 1. Impediment number 2, silos of innovation. This is graphically talked about. This is where we get into a discussion of a digital platform. Islands of innovation. You have these little pockets going all over of innovation, and they're doing innovative projects. The needs, again, is to move it into at-scale operations. One of our forecasts for this year's Futurescape, which actually is being broadcast tomorrow for the first time, by 2021, driven by line of business needs, 70% of CIOs, that's a huge percentage, will deliver agile connectivity. What do I mean by agile connectivity? Using APIs and services and interconnect digital solutions from some kind of technology infrastructure, ecosystem, cloud vendors, system developers, startups, different departments in your company, the vendor partners that you're meeting with at this particular time. Those are all part of a digital platform. What do I mean by a digital platform? This is a graphic that we put up about a year ago. Maybe it's more than that. But what we're trying to describe is a platform that allows you to accommodate the needs of this interconnected environment. This was a picture of it. It's not the technology stacks that we're used to. Those don't handle the scale that's now required of our structures. So you talk about this intelligent core. Basically, this is where the algorithms, the code, the models reside. And notice the top of that is integration service. The bottom of that is development service. This is IT, all right? This is what IT can really do that nobody else wants to do. But what it does is it takes data from the enterprise engagements that are coming from people, assets, processes, APIs, and you take that data and it delivers insights into internal processes to increase productivity, identify things that you can do differently. On the other side, you have data coming in from your ecosystem engagements, from bots, from Internet of Things, from augmented reality, whatever these elements of the ecosystem are. You bring them into this core, and from that you're developing a set of actions that are dealing with your external processes. It's the best we could do to describe the kind of platform, and it's going to be in various conditions, but it's not a discussion of your technology infrastructure that's dealing with servers, networking, etc. It's a different definition of digital platform, of a platform. So the existing infrastructure platforms, while critical, while important, again, you don't even get to take this next step if you can't get this stuff, the infrastructure right, but they don't accommodate scale. Are you moving towards a new industry-oriented, notice the phrase industry-oriented? This is where they're surfacing. You'll see digital platforms in healthcare. You'll see them in retail. You'll see them in education. And these digital, industry-oriented, data-driven platforms are a kind of a movement forward. So, on to the third one. This is the tactical roadmaps. This is the ability, and this was discussed yesterday, where people are identifying a short-term need and they plan accordingly with tactical roadmaps. The message here is that digital roadmaps aren't singular. They have to be collected together for an enterprise. You know, you have very small, almost non-existent, that don't have a digital roadmap, but then you start moving through a loosely connected one to a coordinated one to a single digital roadmap that's strategic in nature. This is kind of a movement. So the question, another statement. 1/3 of organizations undergoing DX have not had a visioning session to reimagine their industry. And basically the reference was made, I can't remember the first name, from the individual from Vantic, talked about the use cases. Tony talked about the use cases. For example, when we're doing forecasting and we put up the concept of the industries, you know, you go through these. There's certain things that an industry has to do in order to understand its market. Blockchain as a service, the channels, the cognitive insurance, the mobile payments, corporate banking, lending as a service. These things are unique to the financial industry. They don't surface in manufacturing. They don't surface in government. And so basically you have to say, what am I doing in terms of visioning where my industry is going to go? So, good news, 47%, and I would emphasize again, what am I describing? Behavior of the thrivers, consistently at 50%. Here's documentation. 47% have recreated the customer's experience of interacting with their organization. They identify both current and future states, and they consider what might be missing or what might need to change. This is more of a strategic context of stepping back and going through and mapping use cases. That's the big buzzword right now. Use cases to whatever your customer journey is. Your customer, not somebody else's, your customer. So can you position your technology solutions with industry use cases that play within your enterprise? The people that are on your business side are trying to figure out, how do I make a better connection with the customer? How do I generate more revenue? How do I increase the productivity that allows me to have a better relationship? And they do this through some kind of form of use cases. Do you understand those? Can you walk in and participate in that? So, fourth one, outdated KPIs. This is where a lot of my own personal research has been involved. It's basically moving to a concept of metrics that matter. And the statement here is that there's a certain set of digital KPIs that the peers are using. And, you know, a DX KPI, if you look at the bottom, that's what the metric is. What's the increase in return on my DX-oriented investments, like an ROI, within applicable market segments? Market share growth, the middle one. The growth of the competitive market share in industries targeted by DX initiatives. These are business-oriented KPIs. They're not IT KPIs. But this is what your business is trying to go for. The question to ask is, number one, do you understand how your business is measuring their success or their DX transformation? And if so, how do you package yourself to go forward with this? So here's an example. We published a research note called Corporate Performance, and we talked about, these were the 5 pillars of digital transformation that Tony put up yesterday. and innovation rate, which was part of leadership, customer advocacy, which was part of the omni-channel, data capitalization, which was that data column, data monetization, business operations for operating a new model, and then the workforce transformation. There's a concept of leading and trailing KPIs. And what's happened with digital transformation, historically we focused on the gold standard, which have all been trailing KPIs, meaning that you measure something from a point in time. What does your board care about if you're a vendor? They care about your sales. How much money did I make last year? That's the gold standard. That's a trailing indicator. You don't really know what that is until the end of the year. However, a leading KPI, which is where we're beginning to need to develop more expertise, and I'll use sales again as an example. You have gosh, my mind just went blank. You talk about, you know how you have the scale going off? You have a scale of 0 to 6, and you're at this stage of the sales cycle, and you're in a 3, and my goodness, you're stuck at a 3. You can't seem to move into the 4, 5, and 6 to close that sale. Lead generation, number of new customers. You know, these are kind of leading KPIs that let you know how you're progressing towards the trailing KPI goal. And we don't have enough of those leading in KPIs in IT that allows you to move forward. So I'm going to skip that. But are you empowering great innovation through IT behavior changes generated by BS-oriented KPIs? I guess what I'm trying to suggest here, understand what the business KPIs are, that they're measuring their success for your enterprise, and then figure out, am I generating the KPIs that are required to deliver the innovation to allow those people to accomplish those business stuff? This is kind of the element of what I'm talking about. Look at the top line automation and the bottom line, the second to the bottom line collaboration. This is where the survivors are spending a lot of their time. Everybody is. They understand DevOps discussion is automation. They understand it for collaboration. But look at what the thrivers are doing differently from the survivors. Look at the difference in how they're operating their budget for DevOps. Look at the difference in terms of how the kind of leadership that's coming for the DevOps initiatives. Continuous delivery and integration, multi-cloud automation. The last one, organizational approach. These are the kind of metrics we're suggesting that are important to IT in order to achieve the business KPIs that are being dictated by your organization. It's important, again, it's foundational that you have a reliable infrastructure. But when you're talking about agility and speed and experimentation, this discussion of automation, of how you're budgeting, about what your leadership is doing, how you're accommodating delivery and integration, and et cetera, these are the things that are going to demonstrate to your team and your business team how you're progressing. We've done this now for 10 areas. We've done it for services management and financial management and vendor sourcing and management. We've done it for infrastructure modernization, application rationalization, cloud adoption. I mean, there's been a whole series of them. And basically, we're finding that there are a certain set of things that thrivers are doing, the green lines, differently than the survivors. And those are the things that you might be able to identify and focus on changing. So do your metrics embrace, empower, and alter IT behaviors through digital KPIs? Or are you stuck with traditional methods that are focused on the efficiency of the IT availability? So closing the discussion out, the last one deals with the limited expertise, and it's a discussion of digital capabilities. What do we mean by capabilities? It's become a new thing to talk about in terms of delivering IT. How often and how long have we talked about people, process, and technology? Very critical in terms of delivering IT. There are two that have been missed that the emphasis on digital transformation is now surfacing. One is the governance discussion. There's something over and above people, process, and technologies that talks about how they're related to each other. And the one that's at the core of everything is what are you doing about the data that's coming from your own machine learnings and is being required by the corporation to move forward. So do your IT policies and solutions enable new digital capabilities of governments and data? I'm sure we all have good experience, things to share based on our personal ventures dealing with people, process, and technologies. Are you stepping forward with the new requirements for governance and data in your environment? These are the capabilities that are being required to run a business. Data monetization, taking the data and turning it into insight, automation or some kind of revenue stream. Sensing and learning, where I'm doing some kind of continuous learning to improve experience, efficiency, and effectiveness. Look at those percentages of the companies that are succeeding in digital transformation. These are the capabilities they want to talk about. Experimental engagement, operating model transformation. So this is what organizations are building for digital. Is your IT organization a part of that discussion? So these are the organizations are facing challenges. And again, the question that I started off with, which digital challenge is impeding your digital transformation the most? And I can stop talking now fast. I got it in, the 35 minutes. I hope you sense how passionate I feel about this stuff. This is some really good stuff documented by quantifiable capabilities. They're saying, here's some things that are working in those IT organizations that are thriving. Figure out which of these 5 are you struggling with the most, and go after that, focus on that, and then when you get that solved, you know, one of the next 5 is going to pop itself up, but at least you've got this one solved.